Okay, welcome to another Sketchbook Saturday. Let's go through some of the sketches I've already done. This book is dedicated to children. It is my way to try to soothe myself for all the children that have been in the news lately being harmed. It is where I can escape to. When I sketch, my brain just goes into a whole new zone, and it is just my way of escaping rather than doing drugs or anything like that. I sketch. It calms me down, it soothes me, and it sort of, eases the pain, eases the emotional turmoil that I go inside. So these are just some of the sketches that I've sketched so far, and these are not victims, these are just sketches. None of these children, to my knowledge, have been harmed, so it's not a sketchbook of children that have been victims. It's just children, just my way of sort of going inside myself and keeping myself calm and getting more centered. And I love this little guy. He's got 2 cookies, 1 in each hand. I just love a 2-fisted cookie eater. I love her because she is just contemplating life. She is just thinking about everything, taking it all in. This was my latest little girl, and she does look sad. I don't know what happened. Maybe she just lost her puppy, but something definitely happened to make her sad. So today we are going to work on this little girl. I really like her. I've sort of pushed her to the side of the paper. It's not the best compositional choice, but in my brain I just want her to look like she is being sort of pushed out of society, sort of forgotten. That's the feeling I get with this little girl. So that was kind of my thinking on why I chose to do such a dramatic composition with her just almost falling off the side of the page. Now this little girl's eyes are really, really a deep, deep brown. They're almost the same tone as her pupil, the black part of the eye, the black round hole, the pupil. But her iris is really a deep, deep, rich brown. So I'm going to have to go ahead and get some of my professional pencils out and get in those darker darks, rather than trying to kill myself doing layers and layers of just the regular HB number 2 pencil. And that is the one good thing about those professional pencils, the professional grade pencils, the ones that go from H's and B's and all that, is that you can get a better nuance of tonal values with those. And you can get really dark, and you can also get really pale with minimal effort, using the correct pencil. So I have gotten her eyes in there. I have really paid attention to the highlights and to the reflections in her eyes. Because her eye is so dark, I had to make sure that I played those up just a little bit so that it wouldn't just be a flat, black circle in the middle of her eye. I wanted to have, a little bit of depth, some definition in there. So I was very mindful of that. When you first glance at her eye, if you don't really look at it, it does look really dark. But you have to kind of tease out those highlights, tease out those reflections to give it that depth and make it look more realistic. She also has some really interesting shadows across her face. The light is hitting her face in a really interesting way, and I'm trying to capture that. She has really dark lashes, although they're not really long, but they're really dark, so it almost makes her eyes look like they have eyeliner on, but it's really just her lashes because they are so gorgeous and dark, and they just line her eyes perfectly because they're so thick. They're just not very long. So I'm going ahead, getting in those shadows, trying to get into the curves of her eyes, the curves of her eyelids. And she is looking really serious. She has got a serious look on her face. And I'm trying to capture that, but also make sure that I capture that she is still a little girl. She is not a woman. Sometimes you can have trouble when you're drawing a young child, but you end up making it look like an adult. So you have to really pay attention to the proportion of the face. Children tend to have bigger eyes. They tend to take up more of the face than adults do. I mean, there are some exceptions because there are some adults that look childlike. But you do have to pay attention to those things. Children's lips tend to be more fuller than adults. Their noses tend to be just a tiny bit shorter than adults, even though their head usually looks bigger in proportion to their body than adult heads do. So there's just lots of things to think about. So I'm really focusing on her eyes. I'm trying to make them look really big. I do want it to come across that she is a little girl and not a woman. So I have to be mindful of those proportions. I have to be thinking about, how that sits in her face. Each feature sits in her face, and how long or short it is, how big it is, how full her lips are. I'm just thinking of all of those things because, of course, as we get older, our lips thin out some, our nose grows longer. Did you know that cartilage never stops growing, which is why your 100-year-old grandma has really big ears, a really long nose, much longer than she did when she was 20, because your cartilage just keeps growing. So your ears keep growing, your nose keeps growing, and that is why as you get older, your proportions of your face change. So just keep all of that in mind. There's a lot to think about when you're drawing. It's not just about shadows and shapes, although that is, for me, the main focus that I look at, the shadows and the shapes. I have to apologize here for my lighting. I moved it back upstairs and I've changed things around in the studio. So when I was actually drawing this, it was getting to be late afternoon and the sun was shining directly in the window. And I don't have my shutters up anymore. I just have some some shears, some little gauzy curtains. So the light does peek through there. And it was also a cloudy day, so you can see that the clouds keep going over the sunlight, and it takes out the sunlight and then it comes back in. But I'm doing the best I can. I think you can still see what I'm doing. I just want to apologize if that lighting bothers you. Now here I'm just really focusing on the shadows around her face. They're really dark on one side, and then she has a dark shadow on the opposite side, but that is from her hair laying over the side of her face, and it's casting a shadow. In between the bridge of her nose, in between her eyes, on the bridge of her nose, she has a darker shadow. And then, of course, her nostrils are darker. They're almost as dark as those pupils of hers. Just because of the way that the sun is hitting her face, it's not really lighting up those nostrils. She also has that little dip right under the nose that leads to the Cupid's bow, that little trough. I'm not even sure what it's called. I need to look that up and find out what that's called. And of course you have to get those shadows to make her nose look rounded and curved, and each nostril to look, rounded and curved. So that is what you need to be looking at, is where those shadows are kind of gliding across that nose, where the darker shadows are hitting, where the light is causing it to be a lot lighter. And of course I have my trusty blender. I love that blending stump because it's so thick and it doesn't hurt my hands to use it, because I do have to use a lot of pressure to blend that graphite across the paper, and sometimes a lot of pressure when I'm holding a really small pencil, it causes my arthritis to get irritated. So that bigger diameter of this one blender just makes it so much easier. I can really press really hard and not have to worry that my joints are going to be paying for it or hurting. Also, my kneaded eraser, I've mentioned those every sketchbook Saturday that I've had so far. I've mentioned that kneaded eraser because I'm telling you, it is your friend, and I really love that thing. So I'm just blending out her skin. I want it to look a lot smoother. I first put down, of course, my pencil marks, and sometimes even if there's a little bit of graphite left on the tip of that blender, you can go into a lighter space and add more graphite rather than having to pick up your pencil. So it's pretty handy that way. And if you get too much graphite down, then you just pick up your kneaded eraser and you just pick it right back up. So it's sort of a give and take. She is coming right along. I just love that expression on her face. She is serious. She means business. I don't know who is in her sights, but she has somebody in her sights and she is not happy with them. And she is fixing to tell them what is what. So I'm just trying to blend under her lips too. She has a darker shadow right there above her chin, right under her lip. And it's just a matter of how the sun is hitting her face, how the light is going across, that shadow is so dark. And it does give the illusion or the feeling that her lips are fuller, which hers are. She has beautiful lips, beautiful full lips. She has a beautiful Cupid's bow on that top lip. I don't. I have pointy lips. I have skinny little worm lips. I wish I had better lips, but I don't. She has beautiful lips. And of course, I'm trying to get in the shadow correctly. Her top lip again is a little bit darker than her bottom lip. It also has some little crinkly textures on it so that it makes it look a little more puffy, a little more full. And then her bottom lip is a little bit lighter than her top lip. And it also has those little creases, those little lines, vertical lines that sort of, to me, it gives it a little bit of puffiness. It makes the lip a little puffy. And I like that. I think it's really pretty. She has a lighter, sort of a reflected highlight right under her lip, right before you get to that darker shadow. When you're looking at lips, really pay attention to those because there can be a reflected light right under that bottom lip before you get to that darker shadow, because the light is bouncing up, and since the lips stick out slightly from your face, you can get a little reflected light from the chin. So it's really interesting to have to really pay attention to these things. So you'll see that little white line, or it's not really white, but that lighter line right under that bottom lip before you get to that really dark thing, that really dark shadow. And that's all that is. It's just reflected light off of the tip of the chin. And now I'm going to just come across her forehead. Her forehead is a little bit lighter. It does have some darker shadows. I'm using the side of my pencil so that I can cover more space, cover more territory at a time, trying to quicken it up. As you see, I've sped this up. This was about an hour and a half it took me to do this sketch, so I sped it up so that you wouldn't have to be here for an hour and a half, and I got it down to about 21 minutes. I did have to cut some pieces out, but I wasn't actually sketching during those pieces. This is an actual beginning to finish sketch that I have not cut anything out. The only thing I cut out is when I had to get up to go get my pencils, and the camera was just sitting on the sketch and there was nothing happening, so I cut that part out. You didn't need to see it. So for those beautiful little decorations that she has at the end of her braids, I'm going to do not a lot of heavy detail on them. I'm just going to do some simple shadowing. Her hair is in braids, or as some people call it, plaits or cornrows, whatever you want to call them. And so I'm trying to get that texture in there, that overlapping texture. They're really fine braids. They're really small. I don't even think I could plait a braid this small if I tried. I just cannot do it. It is an amazing skill to have, to be able to do such tiny fine braids. I can't even do a big fat braid with my hair, so it's not a skill I have, but I am very happy that other people can do it. And I mean, I could get my hair done, I could pay somebody to do it, but I don't think with my face, you have to have the face for braids, and I do not have the face for it. I'm all sharp angles and lines, and the braids would just emphasize that. So if I had a softer face, it would be different, but I don't. Anyway, I'm just trying to get in those texture of her braids She also has the very tip ends with some rubber bands right before she has the little decorations on the bottom. So I've gotten the rubber bands right at the end, and then her hair sort of hooks into those. There's a little hole at the top of those decorations, and her hair hooks into it and comes back around, and then is rubber band sort of around it. So I've tried to get that in there. In the parts of her hair, of course, her scalp is shining through, but she also has tiny little baby hairs in between the rows of braids. So I'm just trying to get that texture in there as well. There's just a lot to think about when you're drawing someone. You have to think about so many things. It is not just do it and get it done. You really have to think. You have to think about how the light is going across the face, how the light hits the face, where the reflected light is, where the highlights are, where the shadows are, the shapes of things, how the highlights or the way that you shadow something causes it to look either round or flat. There's just so many things. The textures of the hair, the textures of the eyebrows, how light or dark the eyebrows are, how light or dark the hair is. How is the light playing through the hair? Is there like just tiny little diamonds of highlights? Like this little girl, to me, she has little diamonds of highlights, highlight diamonds just running all up and down those braids so that it looks like it's sparkling all the way down. But then she has some really deep shadows in there, like where the braids, the strands of hair overlap each other. It's really deep and dark in there. So it's just really a beautiful, complex compilation of lights and darks. And line work as well, because I'm trying to emphasize some of those braids. So I'm trying to get in those deep lines where the strands overlap each other. I'm keeping her decorations for her hair simple, with just simple shading. I'm not doing a whole lot in there. Like I said, I want the girl to be the focus of this drawing, and I want her little decorations in her hair to be sort of the backup singer. She's the star, she is the prima, and everything else is just there to support her, like backup singers. And now I'm just doing the other side of her head. And I didn't like the way that braid was going. It looked like it was going kind of catty-wonka down her head. It did not look right. It looked like I am not a good hairdresser. So I had to erase that and start over. She also has some little baby hair just sort of floating around, like kind of growing on her forehead. It's so cute. So I've also got that texture of her little baby hair coming down from her braids that grow down her forehead, making sure I get some deep shadow in there where those other side braids on the other side of her face are casting shadow. So they're not really long shadows, but they are casting a dark shadow there. So I want to make sure I get that in there, and just adding a little bit more of that baby hair. Oh, she is just so cute. I love this. Love, love, love this. And then again, I am just going in there on those decorations on the other side and doing just simple line work. I'm just doing vertical lines for the shadows pretty much in those hair decorations. Those little beads that she has. They're not exactly beads. I'm telling you, they look like shells, but they're not the right color to be shells. They're like some really pretty pinks and whites and blues. So I'm just going to finish up these braids. Then I'm going to work on her clothes. Her clothes are going to be very simple. Again, I want her face to be the star of this show. So I'm not adding lots of detail onto things like her beads in her hair or her clothes. Just enough to sort of support that she has clothes on and things like that. But I want to finish up these braids first. I really like doing those. It looks like I'm doing squiggly lines, but I'm not. There's actually a pattern, I promise you. Then I'm coming back in, darkening up some of those shadow areas, putting a little bit more of that baby hair on her Now I'm just going to do the clothes. I am going to shadow under her chin because I don't want her head to look like it's just floating in her clothes like that. It gives that a crazy floaty look. We don't like that. So we're going to anchor it with some shadow on her chest. And of course I'm using my really dark 6B to get in that shadow, because her chin, her head is actually casting a dark shadow on her neck and the upper part of her chest. So we're going to get that in. Then we're just going to blend it. There we go. So now her head doesn't look like it's floating so much. It's more grounded. We want a grounded head. And I got my good blender blending away. So I'm going to darken up some of these these lines for her clothes, and just put a little bit more to it so that they're a little heavier, they're a little thicker. And she's done. I think she's beautiful. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you next Saturday.